So Dan, I've been in Strategic Coach at this point in time for over 13 years. Dean Jackson's in the program. It is the highest level coaching program in the world for successful entrepreneurs, and you've heard me say this a million times. You are truly the smartest entrepreneurial thinker that I've ever met in my life. You're brilliant, and you've coached thousands of some of the world's highest level entrepreneurs, and you know a lot about how to make them better, how to assist them. And so most of the people that are watching this video are either already in a business or are definitely entrepreneurs. And so, you know, from the get-go, what the heck do you actually do at Strategic Coach?
Well, I think this is kind of an example of why great entrepreneurs become great, is that they hang around with other great entrepreneurs. And I say that as if it's sort of a flippant statement, but it's really not. You know, there was a great motivational speaker in the States by the name of Charlie Tremendous Jones. And Charlie Tremendous Jones had this great line, which to this day I think is probably the bedrock of how you move ahead with your life. And he said, you know, who you are 10 years ago is really a function of, one, the books you read, you know, like the ideas that you expose yourself to, but who you hang out with. And you know, so when I look at really great entrepreneurs, you go a little ways away from them, and you notice that their networks are just filled up with other people who are really smart, who really challenge them, you know, who are constantly giving them new ideas. And that, you know, I wish there were more secrets than that, but actually, I wish, you know, that I could make some money on, but actually those are the two secrets.
All right, well, this concludes this interview. No, that's fantastic. That is true, though. I mean, really, why do what is it about learning? I mean, what do entrepreneurs really need to learn? Because when you say the people you hang out with and the books you read, I mean, you know, some people are readers, some people are not. Some people go to seminars, other people don't. I mean, what is your take on what do you really need to learn as an entrepreneur?
Well, you know, I was talking to one of my groups about 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to take about a minute to set this up, but it's actually a very instructive thing, because the really great entrepreneurs all have the quality that I'm going to describe here. And I went to Britain, I went to London 1 year, and I went to Westminster Abbey, and you know, you walk around, there's kings buried there, there's prime ministers, and you know, you'd think with Britain being a great theatrical country, there'd be a lot of actors there, but there's only one actor, and his name is Laurence Olivier. And so I got interested, and I said, you know, why only one actor? And you know, I'd seen him when I was a kid. And you know, he predated me by, you know, he was quite a bit older than me. But I read his biography, and he had this trick that he did. And the trick was that he was very famous and he was very popular. And so when he was appearing on stage, everybody would go to see him, you know. So the plays that he was in would last 150, 200, 250 performances. And the reputation he had was, if you went to the 250th performance, it was just as fresh as his first performance. And in the book, it kind of describes how he did this, and that is that before the performance, he'd go out about 15 minutes before the curtain went up, and he'd look through a hole in the curtain, and he had this little ritual that he would say to himself, this is not last night's audience, this is not last night's theater, this is not last night's play, I am not last night's character, the cast is not last night's cast. And he said, it's all new. And as he did this, he would get scared, and he would get excited, just as if it was opening night. And what I find, you know, along with the Charlie Tremendous Jones things, is that one of the things that really great entrepreneurs are always reminding themselves is that whatever they did yesterday, that was last night's play, but now this is a fresh play, this is new. And I think, you know, that really has to do is not taking the audience for granted, not taking that what you were doing before is going to work today, and you're always open to totally, you know, I'm going to get surprised today, and I have to really be alert that there's something new that's going to come out of the blue today, and I have to really be fresh for this.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
So I mean, so as it relates to like to like an education, I mean, I heard you say this very early on when I joined Strategic Coach, is there's two things that you need to become an entrepreneur in the beginning. One is courage, and the other is ignorance.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's really a great way to look at it, because if I really knew all of the challenges that I would encounter going into business, some of it would have scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, you'd be working for the government right now.
Exactly, which would have been that would have been
only civil servants really know the true risks of being an entrepreneur. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, if you really knew what you were getting into, you'd never do it. But,
no, I mean, you're signing up for some insanity at some level, some risks, the levels of responsibility that you take as an entrepreneur, that sort of stuff. But
the courage is that you know that whatever happens, that you'll have the ability to respond to it. I think that's where the courage part of it comes into.
Well, yeah, totally. And so, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things to learn. So, for someone that would be watching this video, out of all of the stuff that they could pay attention to in this day and age, most entrepreneurs that I know are extraordinarily overwhelmed, very busy, don't take any free time, got into the business, I think, because they wanted freedom. They wanted to make money because they thought, but they really don't have any freedom, and they're still trying to, what do I pay attention to? What business book should I read? What seminar should I go to? If they even do that at all. And so, how would you advise someone on how to kind of, have a functional, balanced life with some freedom, but also to be as productive as they could possibly be? I mean, there's a lot to that, I know, and it's not maybe a one-word answer, but what do you tell them?
Well, there's a couple of questions that you asked there, but the first one is, and this is where I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs really burn out, and that is they forget after a while that they're actually in a brain business. They're not in a body business. In other words, it's not how many hours or days your body is at work. It's what your brain doing. And so probably the biggest distinction that my work has made in the marketplace is really the emphasis that I put on free time, is actually having lots and lots of free time so that you can give your mind a lot of rejuvenation and a lot of rest and a lot of refreshment, because when your brain is really at its top function, you can achieve things very, very quickly. You can come up with ideas very, very quickly. And so it's not like you're a factory worker where you get paid for putting in hours. With an entrepreneur, it's just being really alert to new opportunities and taking advantage of them very quickly, and your brain really has to be fresh for that. So I actually put an enormous amount of emphasis. I'm sort of very contrarian here, is it's if you take 20 or 30 weeks off, you can be probably a much more effective entrepreneur than someone who's putting in 50 hour,
I think there's a distinction too, what you do though, because you're an advocate for putting the free time on the front end as opposed to work till you collapse and then take the free time. You're saying take the free time as rejuvenation and approach then the work.
Yeah, and I think the reason is, and it goes to the kind of work that I've noticed that you do, Dean, is that you're testing. I mean, one of the big things that I'm so fascinated with, and Joe, you've kind of introduced me to this world, is the whole world of information marketing, especially those who are using online capabilities. And what I'm so impressed about this world is the willingness to fail really fast. I would say that the secret of this world is to get an idea out and immediately set it up as a test to see, is there any take on it whatsoever, and if there isn't, change and get out there and do something new. Well, your brain really has to be really, really fresh to be, first of all, just to have the emotional courage to say, I thought this was a really great idea. Whoops, didn't work. Let's change real quickly. But then have the stamina on the spot to come up with a new, I'm so impressed with you guys, because I've been, Dean, I've been doing this interview series with really, you guys are kind of like the giants of this new world. And I'm so impressed with the speed with which you're willing to fail. I mean, the success is almost just, fail enough, and then there isn't anything more to fail at, and then all you're left with is something that really works.
Well, see, the beauty of marketing is, in the real world it's called failure, in the marketing world it's called testing. So, it's like,
yeah. Well, that's how, you know me, that's how I rationalized my bankruptcies and divorce a long time ago. It's just extreme market research.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Jackson, what would you like to ask Dr. Sullivan about marketing?
I think one of the things
and I'm gonna get some water
you
here.
talked
You just
about
keep
what
it
you're
in.
able to do with strategic coach and why Joe and I are part of this is you mentioned what Charlie Tremendous Jones said is your income, your life, who you are really is one of the factors is the kind of people that you hang out with. And I know that one of the most incredible benefits of being part of strategic coach when Joe and I go is the people that are in the room. The people that are there are just like, it's a tremendous growth opportunity because everybody is a successful entrepreneur, not just a successful entrepreneur. They're the top of the successful entrepreneurs, and it's just a real growth experience just to even expand your network like that.
Yeah, and I think that just to bring out another quality that I think that really distinguishes the entrepreneurs. There's a real humility. There's a guy named Bill Joy in Silicon Valley, and he's got this famous law, which is called Joy's Law. And Joy's Law is that no matter how smart you are, there's somebody out there who's smarter.
Right.
And you have to recognize that. And I think that when you come into strategic coach, you recognize that you're smart in one way, and that's really gotten you where you are. But what gets you even further is the willingness that just as you're smart in a particular area, there's lots of other people who are very, very smart, just as smart as you are in their areas.
Yeah.
And that just expands you because you realize, well, first of all, I don't have to be smart in their area. I can just take advantage of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so now let's talk about smart marketing, and let's talk about the whole concept of marketing. Me and Dean have spent at least, probably 20 years, if not almost 20 years.
Yeah.
For me, it's been more.
Almost.
I think I'm better than you because I think I've got a year on you or something.
Okay.
What do you think?
I don't know.
No, but we've invested a tremendous amount of time learning and mastering direct response marketing, and we love it because it's a way to replicate yourself. I think marketing is the ultimate leverage, and I'd like to ask you, Dan, what does marketing mean to you? What is it to you? And you're certainly a great marketer, and I'd love to get your take on it.
Well, again, I'm going to have to take second seat here because what we had, when you met us in Strategic Coaches, we were a great sales organization. And, I started this in 1974, and we were always a great sales organization. In other words, put us in front of someone and we can probably get them to sign a check. And not only one check, but we can probably keep them for a long time. So we were good at selling. But what I learned really from you was the fact is that, but how do you get in front of the person? And is that costing you more and more every year, or is there a way that can actually cost you less every year? So the real secret, ultimately, is to be a great salesperson is that you have to be a great marketer first. And great marketing is constantly increasing your ability to catch other people's attention, their interest, and do it at a lower and lower cost every year. And that's, and if you can't do that, then everything comes down to the cost of the actual acquisition of someone who's going to write a check to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
Yeah, and by the way, jump in at any point in time.
Well, I think what you were saying, because we talk about this concept of the before unit and one of the great ways to think about it is to think if you could buy, if it was like a vending machine where you could identify who your ideal customer is, who your ideal client is, and you could push a button, put in the amount of money that you can, knowingly pay to get one of those, and do that as often as you can. That's what really your before you is about building that vending machine that you put whatever the amount that you can spend to acquire a customer. If it's $100, $1,000, $5,000, if you can reliably push that button and have your ideal client end up in your workshops or in your...
Yeah, and I mean, we've, again, it's who I'm hanging out with recently, just to your point, Dean. We did a little comparison, and I mean, this was just like, you've been operating in one world and you think you have it figured out, and then you discover some people who have a whole new methodology. But about a year and a half ago, we went over to webinars, which we had never done. We had always been live speech, usually at trade shows where you ship your team there. You have to pay for air flight, you have to pay for hotels, you have to pay for booth space. And, that had been a tried and true. We were going to the trade shows. And then we introduced this new methodology of webinars, and we just did a little comparison of the last 50 people that we acquired at a trade show and the last 50 people we acquired at a webinar, and we said how much did one cost and how much did the other cost. And the cost of acquisition at a trade show was $1,200, per client. Now the lifetime value of one of our clients is $25,000, so we could sort of justify it. But the 50 that we got from the webinar was $12 per person. So you got $12,000 on one side and 12 on the other, and we're sitting there and we say, which one do we go with? Where does our future lie? And that's the interesting thing about the Dean, the world that you're living in, and Joe, the world that you're constantly pushing with, with all the piranha marketing technologies that you've created. Is there's much better ways of doing this. And we live in a wonderful age. I'm just really happy to be alive in the 21st century, especially the last 10 years. Just because of the technologies that are now empowering entrepreneurs in a way that they used to only be available to large corporations.
Well, what's new about the world and what's always going to stay the same? What I mean is, like, there's things that are timely, that are going to make you successful and that are going to be constantly changing, and innovations, and then there's timeless principles of quote unquote success, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what's timeless, I've got this technique that I use when I start one of my introductions, and I say, I just want everybody to raise your hand. Are you here for you? Are you here for me, or are you here for you? And I said, anybody that said me, put your hand down. And when I say you're here for you, raise your hand. And I think that what's timeless is that people are always there for themselves. And it's your job as a marketer to figure out why they're there for themselves. And that's timeless. And it's timeless that that's always going to be true. What's not timeless is that it's always going to be changing why they're there.
Yes.
In other words, their reasons for being there are going to change with the way the world changes, the way that things. But what's always going to be true is that they're there for themselves. So as a marketer, a creator of new products, new services, new experiences, then you have to realize that it's your job to always be figuring out why are they there, and what are they willing to write a check for, and why would they stay with you? Why would they stay with you? And so if the emphasis, they're never there for you. You have to realize that. And the moment you realize that they're not here for me, they're only there for themselves, and your job is to figure out why they're there for themselves. And I think that's the secret.
So selfish.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Well, I'm a great student of American history, and James Madison, who arguably is the great genius behind the whole, experiment that's called the United States, said, some philosophies are based on that human beings are going to be really, really virtuous. And he says, I think it's a much better bet that they're actually going to be, very selfish and very self-interested. So build a system of government where all their selfishness and their looking out for themselves actually contributes to the common good. So we'll just create a system where where we'll just funnel their selfishness so that it produces great goods for everybody else.
That's great.
And I think that that's basically the marketplace. I think that's capitalism, is that somehow by everybody pursuing their own interests and trying to get what they want, it actually produces an enormous amount of good for everybody.
What makes a successful producing entrepreneur? And I'll let Marie do the honors.
Gosh, what makes a successful entrepreneur? I'm not sure that that somebody will know that they're an entrepreneur from the beginning. I think they will have a desire to make a difference to other people's lives, and they'll see that that something's frustrating them. There's a gap in the markets. They feel they can do it better themselves, and they'll try to fill that gap in the market, and that's and then they almost become an entrepreneur by default. I don't think you can sort of set out to become an entrepreneur. I think you've got to set out to make a difference to other people's lives.
Gotcha. Well, what are the business principles that have stood out for you that just have worked really well for Virgin and for even building any sort of organization or cause?
Well, again, I don't necessarily think of them as business principles. I think the word, I think the word business, it becomes the business. But what you're doing is you're painting a picture. You're trying to create something to make a difference to other people's lives. You have a blank canvas, and you're filling in every little bit of that canvas to get every single little detail right. And if that canvas, sings out at you at the end, and it's a beautiful picture, your business is going to be successful. If bits of the canvas are not quite right, your business may fail. So if you set up to change people's lives, you've got to get every single little detail right. You've got to make sure that the people that you're working with 100% believe in what you're trying to do, and you've got to make sure that what you're trying to do is worthwhile spending your time on, and at the end of the day, you want to be sure that that the people's lives you've affected, you've really you've affected them and benefited them, and if you get all that right, hopefully you'll be able to pay the bills at the end of the year.
Well, I know you've started so many businesses, Richard. I mean, you have, I think, 300 some companies right now, and so many entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are startups, who are in their growth phase, who are even in their legacy phase. And if you're in a startup mode, I mean, you just talked about this painting the canvas. That's really incredible. What is there, like, one tangible piece of advice that you wish that you had when you were just starting your first business?
I mean, the absolute key, and I'm like an old stuck gramophone record that existed in my day, is how good you are with people, and if you genuinely care about people, if you can surround yourself with people that genuinely excited about what you're doing, if you can draw out the best in people, if you're good at lavishing praise on people and not criticizing your people, and inspiring your people, that's something you just have to do from day one. Never use the I word. I mean, it's you're a team. We're doing this. We're doing that. Just never ever let it sort of center on yourself, and just be a great leader of people. And if you can do that from day one, even if you've got one other person working with you or two other people working with you, then you can enjoy the good times together. But there will be bad times, and your people will pull around for you. They'll work day and night to try to keep whatever it is you're creating alive, and make sure that make sure it survives. So the number one lesson is be a great people person.
That's great. And I got a quick follow-up. And the follow-up would be, so now you've started to make it as a business owner. So now we work with a lot of, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure business owners. What did you do to take it to really the whole next level?
Well, I think the next stage is is to be a great delegator, and not try to do everything yourself. Try to find people who are better than you all the time. Try to find people who are better than you to put you out of business effectively. So, whatever you're spending all your day doing, try to find someone who's better than you to do that, to replace you at it, so that you can go off and think about the next big picture. An entrepreneur is not a manager. I mean, an entrepreneur is somebody who is great at conceiving ideas, starting ideas, building ideas, but then handing over to really good managers to manage the businesses. The moment you've got more than one business, you can't be hands-on doing everything. If, on the other hand, you are, you're not really a great entrepreneur, but you're a really good manager, then fine, just immerse yourself in the business, worry about every detail. Don't worry about having to, move on to other businesses. So it slightly depends on what kind of person you are. In a strange way, Steve Jobs was more a manager than an entrepreneur. I mean, it sounds slightly strange to say that because, but I mean, he was somebody that, focused on, almost specifically on one subject matter. Immersed himself in that business. He second-guessed everybody with everything. No bit of artwork could go out without his approval. And he built a formidable business, but pretty specific business in one area. And it worked very well for him. But if you want to be a true entrepreneur and build a lot of different businesses, you've got to be a great delegator.
Here's the thing. I've been a strategic coach since 1997. Me and Dan do the 10X Talk podcast together. Hang out quite a bit over the years with Dan and Babs, and even up at their, cottage, and we spent a lot of time together doing a lot of things. And you've taught me how to really look at things that I invest in as a cost versus an investment. And you also have done extraordinarily well in Genius Network. And what I really admire the most about you is that you're at a position where it'd be really easy for you to just constantly be the smartest guy in the room or be the quote-unquote guru, and you always have a beginner's mind as you approach things. And so the thing, even though you've coached more successful entrepreneurs than anyone in the world, you are great at being a student and participating in ways. And a lot of people that haven't even done 1/100th of what you have done, I see a level of they start believing their own PR and they get arrogant and they think they're really cool, or they swoop into an event, and as long as they're on stage, that's their, and then they're gone. And so you're not that way at all, and you're constantly learning. And you also help other people with how to, take that approach. So I've written some questions that I want to make sure I ask you in the right way. What's your perspective and definition of cost versus investment is the first one, but if you want to say anything before that, I just want to make sure we set it up right.
Yeah, I think my focus in any situation that I get into is just what's my mindset going into the situation, and what I try to do is to treat the past as raw material. In other words, that I'm very interested in my past, but I'm only interested in my past as raw material that can be transformed into new lessons for the future. So I'm constantly going back, taking situations for my life, and I was so impressed with your video, and I've been enormously impressed with Joe ever since I first met him. In spite of his best efforts when I first met him to seem like he was really odd, I didn't see how odd he was, but I saw this incredible capability in the middle. And so what I say is that one of the keys, and I guess I'm proving it more now for a lot of people, it's because I'm over 70, but my number one rule is that you always have to make your future bigger than your past, okay?
And that has to do with that the past is simply there for learning and the future is there for winning. And so that's my basic attitude. So when I walk into Genius Network every time, I do a little thought process before I come in, and I say, okay, we're starting fresh, so what is it that I'm actually looking for when I come to Genius Network? And it's kind of funny because even before we started, we already got 2 crucial pieces of information, one on an AI program that actually does wonders on your website, and that was just in a chance conversation that we had at dinner the night before. Somebody mentioned this. I said, bingo, there's one.
Right, right.
And then the next morning, we were sitting in the restaurant here at the hotel, and this man was sitting at the table next to us, and we said, "It's a hi," and everything like that. And then we started chatting, and then we invited him over, and we talked for an hour and a half. And from Australia, Jason, where is Jason here? Anyway,
Over there.
Oh, there he is. So anyway, I have a phrase that our eyes only see and our ears only hear what our brain is looking for. So our number one responsibility is just to tell our brain what we're actually looking for, and then your eyes and ears are out there picking up what you're doing. And then, so I really zeroed in on Jason, and then I knew somebody in strategic coach program who would be very interested in Jason. So the first thing I did when I could yesterday, I introduced the 2 of them, and I said, you 2 have a lot to talk about. And then when Bo came up, I said, you know, it's time for me to do Bo's course. So I went up to Bo and I said, next year I'm gonna do your program. So, you know, even before, you know, the first hour of Genius had started, 3 things that already happened that corresponded to what I was looking for.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, and see, one of the things that when you showed me the impact filter that you did for the 100K group, so Dan joined 100K right when we first started it. And the interesting thing was watching how he thinks about something before he goes into it. So me and Dean Jackson in I Love Marketing, we actually teach a model of the before, during, and after unit, because there's 3 stages of your business. There's the before unit, what you do before you start interacting with a client doing business. Then there's the during unit, and then there's the after unit. After somebody gives you money, how do you deliver world-class service so that they love you, appreciate you, and repeat business and generates referral business. And so as business owners, it's a real simple framework to not just think of, oh, I got to grow my business. Well, do you want to grow if it's growing the business, the before unit? Do you want to do better in the during or the after unit? Because some people are really great at before, but they're not very good at during. Some people are great at during, but they're terrible at after. You know, they never interact with the clients after the fact. So if you look at your business as having 3 different units, but then I realized by watching Dan with any sort of learning experience, it's what he does. It's kind of like what Robert Cialdini was talking about, persuasion. It's what do you do before the event? So before every Genius Network event, Genius X event, Dan does thinking beforehand, and you don't spend a lot of time doing it.
About a half hour.
Yeah.
About a half hour.
But what he does is, this is a great line, is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, the juice is worth the squeeze to the degree that you are able to squeeze, to the degree that you're able to go into it very thoughtfully, very intentionally. And so, where's Alex Mandozian? Is he in the room yet? Okay, Alex, I wasn't at the breakfast thing. How was that, by the way? Yeah, thank you. And so Alex held an event called Pathfinders, and I went to it, and before the event, I read every bit of the program and made notes beforehand. And a lot of times I've not done that in the past, but I do that thinking about Dan, because Dan goes into things, you know, very thoughtful. And it just made a world of difference once I was there. And so a lot of times people that don't do any sort of thoughtful, intentional thinking before they go to something, then they're waiting for that thing to impress the hell out of them, when in reality it was up to them to create the experience. You know, because the experience you have in Genius Network or here or any sort of environment, as a matter of fact. So it's the same thing with Strategic Coach. But the big thing I want to point out, though, is the cost versus investment.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you speak to that, because you've articulated it better than anyone I've ever heard.
Yeah, so what I see is you have a choice, and I believe the more that your life going forward is a choice rather than that things happen to you and then you, as you say, you react to them. But just using Robert Cialdini yesterday, that it struck me as Robert was talking, that the best way to be a persuader of other people is actually to be a persuader of yourself. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I don't see Genius Network as any kind of cost whatsoever, because I've persuaded myself that, can I give you some numbers? I just want to tell you, I did a thinking process that we have in Strategic Coach called the Impact Filter. And it's a way that I prepare my mind for any kind of situation, whether I'm doing a new workshop, whether I'm doing podcasts, whether I'm writing a new book. And I persuade myself before what the optimum outcome is. And I tell myself the breakthroughs I'm going to have, even though I don't even know what the experience is. And then I just sit back and I watch how these breakthroughs are coming. And they never come quite the way that I've defined them, but they're usually better than I've defined them. And I think the reason is because I've persuaded my mind for breakthroughs.
Yes.
And so I was thinking of Robert because I persuade myself continually that I'm going to maximize or optimize any situation that I'm in, but then I just let reality present itself to me, and then I say, well, there's one, there's another one, there's another one, and it works, But therefore, I've invested a great deal to set up the situation so that the best possible thing can happen. And it's always a surprise. I mean, it's not like it's predictable. It's not. What's predictable is that the experience is going to be a great experience. And I'll contrast that with what I see with a lot of people, and I even see it in my program. I see it with people, and we're getting big. I've noticed a trend that as we've gotten bigger as a company, we've started to attract companies that are our size or bigger. Right. So we're about 130 team members now. We're in 3 countries. We operate in 10 cities. But I've noticed people who are incredibly successful come in, but they still have a mindset that I would call a consumer mindset. And I like to contrast the consumer mindset with what I call the transformer mindset. And the consumer mindset is that the world is supposed to do it for you, okay? And you retain 3 mindsets. The one mindset is a critical mindset, so you retain the right to criticize what's going on. And number 2, you retain the right to complain about what's going on, and then you retain the right to blame. So it's criticize, complain, and blame. And it's amazing to me that entrepreneurs have gotten to such a high level of success with those mindsets. Right. But the problem is nothing's ever good enough for them. Nothing ever matches their ideals. Okay, so I don't have any ideals. What I have is measurement. I have persuasion, then I have measurements of how well my persuasion has identified things I didn't even know I was looking for. The opposite of that is what I call the transformer mindset, that you go in and you transform the actual experience that you're having, and there's three mindsets there too. And the first one is that you contribute. Mm-hmm. Contribution is just the magic password. You're going to go in to actually create value for other people. Number 2, you're going to collaborate with other people. So to the degree that teamwork is available during that period of time, then you can collaborate. And number 3 is that you create. You just create new things. And so to me, at 74, I'm not trying to get anywhere. Yeah. I'm just trying to expand my transformer mindset of contribution, collaboration, and creativity. And so I feel that time is actually slowing down for me. It's not speeding up.
Wow. Well, so you, what are your thoughts? Because you're a big fan of Ben Hardy, of course.
Ben Hardy, I'm a big fan of.
Where's Ben?
Did I mention?
Yep.
Did I mention that I'm a big fan of Ben Hardy?
You just did. Yeah, you just did.
Yeah.
And so Ben, you know, with his book, Willpower Doesn't Work, and I know he's doing a book with you, Who Not How.
Who Not How, yes.
And Ben is a great example, you know, because people say, you know, why is it that you do certain things with certain Genius Network? Like there's some sort of clique or favorism
There is a clique.
within Genius Network. And it's like, well, a lot of that depends on the energy, the collaboration, the contributions of people. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to single out. See, people that I really attach to single themselves out by just exhibiting great sort of, I mean, you're the same way. That's why me and you do so much together, because you hear the same thing at Coach about me, like what, you know, like the people that don't understand our relationship probably, you know, they kind of have their own story about it. So Ben writes about willpower doesn't work, and he writes about the environment and creating the sort of environment, and what you've always been a master at, and I think from the very early stages of Strategic Coach in a lot of ways is AA for workaholics that are super high achievers. And you bring them in and you talk about free days and focus days and buffer days, and that if you want to, you know, a lot of your perspectives that a entrepreneur that is too tightly scheduled cannot transform themselves, right?
Yeah.
And you give people freedom. And a lot of entrepreneurs, if you ask, what do you want? Well, I want freedom. But a lot of them don't have any time freedom. A lot of them don't have relationship freedom. And a lot of them don't have money freedom. Although compared to the average person, you could probably say that they do. And you give them ways to think about freeing that up. But you create an environment and you show them how to actually set that environment up. And then you surround yourself with people that support you in what it is that you want to do. And before I just quit rambling here, I remember, you know, hearing from you, if you spend a lot of time working on what you're weak at, your weaknesses, at the end of your life you have a lot of really strong weaknesses. Yes. And so your whole thing is focus on your strengths and surround yourself with a unique ability team. So you go to environments where you can tap in the capabilities. So Genius Network for you, from my perspective, is you're coming to find other people that can just, you're not going to spend the time, the money, the energy, you're just going to go and latch on to that and access it and collaborate with it and continue to build and grow yourself. So, but a lot of this has to do with the environment and how you self-select that.
Yeah, and it's a skill. So, you know, I mean, everything, it starts with mindset, and mindset alters your behavior. So when you look at people's behavior, it tells you nothing unless you go back upstream and look at the mindsets that actually determine the behavior. And what I reflected in my description of my first 5 years in Genius Network with Babs, and by the way, Babs right here, Babs Smith is my partner, and and, you know, unless I know Babs, I haven't created Strategic Coach. I mean, we actually had T-shirts last year on her birthday that said, "No Babs, no Coach." And I said, my life has two stages. It's BB and AB, and it's before Babs and after Babs. And if I hadn't met Babs, I'm just a smart drunk worried about the rent. You know, and I say that honestly because I really required that collaboration with the person not only who is my partner in my personal life, but my partner in my business life. Yeah. And I'd gone through a lot of setbacks and a lot of frustration until I met Babs, and then bang, you know, there was just this huge jump, and it's gone. You know, we're into our collaboration, we're really into our 35th year, going into our 36th year. But when Babs and I came to Genius Network, the very first thing you said when we started, you said, you're paying $25,000 for this, and if you don't get $250,000 of value out of it in the first year, I won't let you come back. And so I was sitting there and I said, 10 times. And we had done a thinking exercise in Coach, which is called the 10 times mind expander, where you go back 25 years to when you were 1/10 of where you are, and you talk about the stages of growth that got you to where you are. And, we just create a structure, and people say, amazing, how I did that. And I said, now you're 10 times where you were when you were 1/10, but could you have predicted how you were going to get to 10 times back then? And of course, you couldn't. And I say, okay, so we're going to do it again now. I've given you proof that you've already gone 10 times, and now what I'm going to say is, we're going to pick a date in the future when you're going to go 10 times, and then we're going to work on that. But I came up to you after the first, I said, I'm going to create a whole program called the 10 Times Ambition Program. Right. And it happened in the first half hour, and at the first break, I came up to you and I said, I just got my money back, and it turned out that first insight in the first hour of my first 25K, after 5 years, had netted a $16 million, which turned out to be a 64 times return on investment. Yeah. And it was just bang, I got the idea. And then, so when I started 100K, so first 5 years is going to be $1 million, I said, we're going to get $64 million. And the very first workshop I was in, I met Ben, and all my career in Coach, I've been looking for the writer who he's not an inside writer, but an outside writer who just totally gets what we're talking about. And he's got a reputation, and he's got an audience, and he's got a reach, and he's got an agent, and he's got a publisher, and they have a big budget. And I said, bingo, there's my writer. And so we have our first project, it'll be written during the next year, and then we go. And Ben said, after this book, can we do another book? I said, you bet. And
that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, so yeah. I sweetened the deal, and I said, Ben, all the money we make on these books is your money. I just want the customers who come from your books. Right. So just like that, and it's going to be 64 times. I know it'll be plus I've gotten an enormous amount elsewhere. I've talked to John Ratliff a lot over the years about his thinking about this, packaging your company as if you're going to sell it. And I tell you, the 2 hours yesterday afternoon, you know what it was for me is that was a threshold 2 hours for Genius Network, because you're now jumping where we're not just talking about entrepreneurs, we're really talking about entrepreneurial companies. And I just felt it was like time for Genius Network. Everybody put their big boy pants on and actually start thinking about companies. And so it's really great. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for $64 million of value every time I come here.
Which is, okay, so I love that, for one.
No, and you just have the intention, and then you keep your eyes and ears out, because you don't know where the actual opportunity is going to come from.
To the people in the room, there's a lot of resources. Human resources here are some of the greatest. I mean, Chip Franks with Joe Volunteer, it's basically taking human resources that want to contribute and creating a mechanism for people to link them with each other, because so many, this is a room filled with incredible genius, wisdom, and knowledge. It's a tribe of tribal leaders. So advice on how to build yourself as a better entrepreneur, how to get the most out of this community, because both of you have done a great job with it.
Dan, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just have a couple insights about it. First of all, you have to realize that being an entrepreneur is a life sentence. And you can't go back. How many of you know that once you've gone out, you can't go back? So you're condemned to be an entrepreneur for the rest of your life. And a lot of people want to play it half and half. I could do what I'm doing as an entrepreneur, or I could do something else. And I want to tell you, it's not true. You have no other option except to continue on the way you are. So my feeling is make it fun, and so go for the part of
your entrepreneurial experience that tells you that you're always energized. And the other thing is, if everybody could just cut off today thinking about their entrepreneurial future as an individual future and start thinking about it as a team future. So I'm surrounded by teamwork. I'm not in control of any one of my work days. I walk in the morning and I am controlled and managed by other people from morning till night. I'm told when to show up, I'm told what to do, but I am in charge, so I'm not in control. So one of the biggest things for entrepreneurs, you have to give up the idea of control and switch over that you're 100% in charge, but other people are 100% in control. Okay, it's like the entertainment industry or the sports industry. The top performers are not in control, but they are in charge. And and so the other thing is, don't try to have a complete life. Okay, the notion of bucket list and completing your life and leaving a legacy are all signals to the universe to take the parts back. Okay. I want to die in the middle of 8 projects. I mean, if I die, I want it to be a surprise, and I'm in the middle of 8 projects, and there's no grieving for the first 2 or 3 weeks because people are so pissed off about the mess that I've I mean, this whole notion, I'm going to bring my life to completion, I mean, God, this is a death signal, I mean, you're talking yourself into the grave, death needs no assistance. Death needs no assistance, and I'm not giving death any assistance. And, we have fun with, Peter and I have really fun with the longevity thing because people, every time we talk about this 156 and 700 thing, the podcast goes right off the charts. Every podcast, people are really interested in this topic. How many of you, if you could extend your active working career for 25 years right now, right at the top, you'd actually make a lot of investment to actually do that?
Well, I want to see who doesn't want to.
Yeah, who's wrapping it up within the next 12 months? Because I'd like to buy a life insurance policy on you and have me as the beneficiary.
So great. Advice for entrepreneurs. Listen, it's we are linear and local thinkers. Our brains, the 100 billion neurons in our brain, the 100 trillion synaptic connections were evolved on the savannas of Africa hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago. And so we have these cognitive biases. And what we do is we take our past and we extend it into the future. And that's a linear extension. And that puts a self-imposed limitation on us on what we can do. And so I'm going to ask you to think about, are you putting those self-imposed limitations on your life? Right? Because are you building a business for what used to be possible versus what is now possible, right? A world of infinite information, infinite computing speed, massive amounts of capital, all of these things. So in that world of it's the best time ever to be alive, in a world of near infinite opportunity, in a world of abundance, my question to you is, are you doing the most important thing that you can be doing, right? Are you doing something because it's a quick buck, because you inherited it, because you have a partner you're obligated to, or are you doing something that gives you joy, right? I cannot believe the shit I get to do, right? I feel so grateful, so lucky for being able to dream about opening up the cosmos with planetary resources, or extending the lifespan with human longevity, or the investments I make with bold capital. I mean, I'm a kid in the candy store, and I'm just excited about life. And every one of us has that ability, right? You can make a career out of anything. What did you want to do as a kid, right? If I gave you $1 billion of cash and said, go make the world a better place, what would you do with it? That's, what I learned from you, Dan, is who do I want to be a hero to, right? Those kinds of thinking is where your massively transformative purpose is. And so take 1 second, and answer this question in your heart and your soul. Are you doing right now the thing that is the most important thing in your life that gives you joy? Are you doing what you're doing right now out of obligation? Or is it truly your calling in life that at the end of your life you can look back and say, wow, I'm so lucky to have worked on that? If you're doing the thing that is your greatest joy and that you feel so lucky to be working on, commit to 25 years. Go 10 times bigger, right? And by the way, going 10 times bigger means letting go of the past. You can go 10% bigger working harder. You can't go 10 times bigger working harder. You have to reinvent the entire business to get 10 times bigger. If you're doing something out of obligation, consider selling it, letting go of it, dumping it, giving it to a friend, and making the white space to live and to live a full life.
You know, I have a question I want to ask both of you guys. See if I can phrase this correctly. Where would you put ethics and ethical behavior in the world of entrepreneurship or marketing? You know, because a lot of times we think that success equates to unethical behavior, right? You always see a lot of people that are cheating and lying and so on and so forth. Or that if you're too ethical, you're out the door, right? So, and I know that you guys each have a real kind of deep take on this. Let me ask you, Dan, start off. Where do you put ethics and ethical behavior in the realm of marketing or success?
Yeah, it's it's really interesting, and I'll join another word to ethics, and that's morality. You know that the two go together. Ethics, morality has to do a lot with your mindset and the values that you have. But ethics is really about your behavior. How really the ethics is your morality in action. And but one of the things I've noticed, I read an article once about inner city kids, who could be dead at 8, they could be dead at 12. South Chicago. So part of the year I live in Chicago because our main U.S. company is right near O'Hare, but it's a war zone down there. There's 2 postal zones. America is really organized. If you go to any big city, you go to the police, police headquarters, and police headquarters, and you talk to the officer in charge of violent crime, in the city, and you bring a map and you give him a marker and you say, where should I not go in this city? And they always do it by postal zones. And in Chicago, it's 2 postal zones. Isn't it interesting how Americans organize crime according to post? I mean, what a country, And anyway, so those kids do not have enough certainty about life that they can think more than 24 hours at a time. So when there's a possibility of stealing something, their first thought is, can I get into trouble in the next 24 hours? So what I came to is that ethics is a function of your time perspective. Okay. If on the other hand, you have a time perspective, if I do this now, what's it look like 10 years from now? The behavior that you will exhibit during the next 24 hours will be ethical. And the reason is you don't want to be doing something today that costs you 10 years from now. And so my sense is that ethics is really a function of time perspective.
Very interesting. One of the things I really admire about both you guys, Dan, is you guys both have really interesting perspectives on stuff. It's not just the usual shit that you read in books, like who else would come up with that? I mean, I think you're absolutely right, but over to you, Joe. What's your take on ethics in business?
Yeah, it's considering for even the carpet cleaning industry, which is where I started off, I created a thing called ethical services. And I've always tried to use the whole concept of I asked Dan years ago, let me start with this, and I'll try to share several different ideas in a little riff that I'll do here. So I asked Dan, what's your favorite definition, or what's your definition of selling? And he just blurted out, and I don't know how many years ago this was now, Dan, probably like 15 years ago or something.
And he said, selling is getting someone intellectually engaged in a future result that's good for them and getting them to emotionally commit to take action to achieve that result. Now, I have that memorized because I thought about it quite a bit when he said it.
Another
And
great one.
yeah, Dan always has these very interesting quotes that he shares. And so, and let me just say this too. I probably should have said this early on. Do you know, between both of you, do you know how many, God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people, maybe in the millions range, that both of you have inspired, encouraged, have them show up to face incredible difficulties with, maybe not in the funnest of ways, but just the ability to get through life when life is very difficult. I mean, both of you have been such incredible mentors and role models, if you've intended to be that or not. It's just what you are. I mean, by the very nature of, Jesus, just look at how many reviews The War of Art has, right? And how much both of you impact people. And so, everyone has something to sell. Part of it is the bigger future, though, in a way to look at life. And so when I asked Dan that definition, I started asking my clients, what do you think are the most important words in the definition, getting someone intellectually engaged in a future result that's good for them and getting them to emotionally commit to take action to achieve that result? People would say engage, they would say action, they would say commit. And most people didn't get the three words, good for them. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, you can get someone intellectually and emotionally engaged in porn and shitty food and doing something damaging. I mean, what I've liked about The War of Art is it's always about the higher self, not about the lower self. I mean, you can, you can be a degenerate and you can get involved in vices and all that. That does, there's, that, as you say, resistance will give you a free pass on that sort of stuff. And so as it relates to ethics, I always think of, what's good for someone. And would you sell it to your best friend? Would you sell it to your mother or your father, with the assumption you like your mother and your father? For someone that you really care about, if you're in a situation where someone's going to go down a bad path or something that could be damaging or it could be rotten or it could be scandalous or not good for them, and you cared about that person, you would try to intervene. You might use words, you might use a challenge, you might use an intervention, you might try to block them from harm's way. And so who are we in the best of terms when we care about someone? We're selling, we're being persuasive, but we're doing it with the mindset of we're trying to care for this person and we're trying to protect them. So when it comes to, I think everything in my life is about connecting other people with ideas, with each other, with things that make them better, not always feel good. But like, for instance, you wrote the Warrior's Ethos, which you recorded in 2011. Everyone would be their lives will be enhanced if you download that book and listen to Stephen read it. It's called The Warrior's Ethos. Like, I think it's less than 90 minutes. And it's great. And you talk a lot about, Spartans, and you have such this deep knowledge of so much of history. But anyway, there's the whole goal of making someone better is not always going to make them feel better. It's not always about happiness, right? And we live in this culture where everyone wants to pursue feeling, sweet and loving and all that sort of stuff. But the fact is, human progress oftentimes takes enormous effort and in many cases, sacrifice. And so when it comes to connecting, there's true connecting, because you're either in communication with someone or you're trying to escape, and when you are connecting with someone, you care about them. You're operating from a good place. Connecting, though, is when you're conning people and making it look like connecting. So there's connectors that use con artistry and they con people and they blow smoke up their ass and they sell crap and they make promises and they have no intention of delivering on, or they're selling crap in a box, and the very best thing you're going to ever see from them is their sales pitch or their marketing. But then there's real people that when they sell something to somebody or when they offer something to somebody, they actually really care about that person being better off as a human. So for me, there's a difference between situational behavior and situational ethics. I mean, you might tell really crude, dirty jokes to your buddies that you would, were in the military with, that could be vulgar, that could be inappropriate to many people, but you might not say that to, someone's grandma. Most people have drank beer. Most people have gone to church. You usually don't drink beer in church, although I'm sure people drink beer in church. There's a difference between situational behavior and situational ethics. And I like people who understand the distinction and who operate that way, because we've all met people that, man, they just put on a great show. They really act like they care about you, but they're usually narcissists or sociopaths, or they have just created a value system, that is different than, the ones that we made it adhere to. And the weird thing, and I'd like to ask you guys about this, as I'm rambling here, what I'm thinking in my mind is that I think most people think they're right. It's that saying that, we judge others by their actions, we judge ourselves by our intentions. And I first heard that when, I don't know if you, well, Dan, I know you know Harvey Mackay. Do you happen to know Harvey Mackay?
No.
Stephen, he wrote a book years ago. His most famous book, he's written a bunch of books, was called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive.
And I've heard of the book, yeah.
Yeah, sold millions of copies. And he's now 90 years old, and he's a dear friend of mine. And so Harvey, he was doing this small event that he invited me to. It was like kind of a brainstorm with a bunch of business owners. And one guy was Chris Widener was talking, and he said to the group, he's like, "How many of you have ever been ripped off by someone?" About half the people raised their hand. And he's like, "How many of you ever ripped off anyone?" And no one raised their hand. And he said, he goes, "That's interesting." He goes, "You know why?" He goes, "Because the reason you've been screwed by someone, but you don't think you've screwed anyone, is we judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by their actions." And I thought about that quite a bit. And we all, like, you could intend to do the right thing, but do your actions actually show that? So I think it takes a deep level of awareness and looking at the byproduct of your behavior and because all of us have times where we're loving and we're caring and we're doing well in life, and others where we're desperate and we're self-centered and we're tired and we're exhausted and we're maybe taken advantage. And so part of it is not that there's some perfect, angel human that's always operating out of, perfect ethics and morality. It's just being able to set up a way you operate and way you behave and the way you conduct yourself in your character. Like, my whole book is not about capabilities, even though I share a lot of them. It's about character. My goal of my book is to not just build, Hitler had enormous capabilities. I'd say it'd be really hard to say his character was a good character. I mean, look at the destruction that some of these people, when Dan, you were talking earlier with Stalin and Mussolini, I mean, they all had capabilities. You don't rule a country. You don't do what these people did without capabilities. Some of the smartest marketers I know have enormous capabilities, but their character is kind of shit. And so, but that's my opinion, because if you were to ask them their intentions, they all think their value system is their value system. So there's a lot of den of thieves. I grapple with this, one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. So, what is it? But those are my thoughts. That's at least some of my thoughts about ethics and morality, is what's the byproduct of what your life is about, and where it leaves people. Does it leave the world and people and around you in a better place, or does it cause destruction?
But I think you would say, Joe, that, like, as a marketer or an entrepreneur, that the more, and I'm sure you would say the same thing, Dan, the more good you can do, the better it is for you, for your own selfish interests. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. And Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Again, I have more thoughts on it, but I want to, I'll kind of.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I think the other thing is that, that there's a matter of, leading a very complicated life or a simple life. And, I'm a straight ticket Republican ever since I could vote. And in Canada, I'm a straight ticket conservative. But one of the presidents that I admire most was Harry Truman. And after, because he's the one that had the big decisions, so many big decisions. And, and I remember there's a story, it might be apocryphal, but the day after Roosevelt died, of course, he was sworn in as the president, and he met with Roosevelt's cabinet, and he came in and he said, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, here comes Harry, a hick from Missouri, and he said, and you're used to Roosevelt, one of the great gods of American politics, but he says, here's the facts of it. I'm as powerful as he is because I'm president of the United States. And guess what? You're still cabinet secretaries, and I can fire you just as easy as he could fire you, and it just put everybody straight because he knew they were going to scheme against him. He knew what they were doing because they schemed against Roosevelt, that they do that. But he had a great saying. He says, always tell the truth. It's more economical. You only have to remember one version. And I think that ethics is a form of truth, and that is you can be the same person in all situations. And I think that, and a lot of people, they have to check out their surroundings to figure out who they're going to be in that situation, or they have to figure out who they've told what, to make sure that, they're keeping their story straight, and their story is so complicated, it's very, very hard to keep it straight.
Yeah.
And I said, that all comes at the price of what you're really good at. That comes all that. I mean, if you do that, you're totally non-creative. You're a totally reactive human being. And I think that ethics gives you a very simple, energizing path into the future where you only have to be the same person all the time.
Yeah. I mean, another way of looking, I haven't really thought this one through. I'm going to be blathering as I say this, but another word for it seems to me, could be authenticity, in the sense of when you open your mouth and you speak, you're really saying what you really think, and not what you think is going to create a favorable impression in somebody else's mind.
Yeah, one of your, in your current book, the book's coming out, you were talking about what your attitude has to be when you're writing, and you can't think about, is this a great book? Is it, is it, am I, is this really going to move people? You say, I'm going to throw myself completely in it, and I'm going to finish it, and get the book. And I remember Reagan. I'm kind of a Reagan type of writer. And when Reagan, got to governor, I don't think so much when he was governor of California, but when he became president, people say, yeah, everybody laughs at me because of the movies I was in, what about crappy movies? And he said, well, I have to tell you, back then, they didn't tell us that the movie had to be good. They said they didn't want the movie good. They wanted the movie Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. And I think that's a copywriter's attitude. In other words, you got a deadline. I mean, people say Shakespeare, I could be like Shakespeare. I said, there's two things you have to remember. He did it for money and on deadline.
Yeah, and Dickens too, that was writing, installments.
He did for money. And so my feeling is that, and Joe brought it up at the beginning. You brought it up, Stephen, that the best way to be really good in yourself is have it be for value for other people. In other words, that you have in mind who you're doing this for, and so. Is it going to make a difference in that person's life? And how are they going to feel after, how are they going to feel about the value that they got from you? If you have your emphasis on that, you're taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Your friend who was in 24 that you visit with in Sundance, the actor, Glenn Morshaw, and he's a fascinating guy. And I have to say that if you looked at his life, he's a Hollywood actor. He does movies, he does TV and everything. I bet he is the most fully employed actor in the history of the United States over the last 50 years. Huh. And he was telling Joe, he said, well, he says, you got to look at it from the standpoint of a director. He says, you can't look at it from any other standpoint of the director. And the director needs 2 or 3 stars to even get on the board. He said, so I'm not a star, okay? And then he comes down to about number 5, and he said, who am I going to put in number 5? And he says, I'm always number 5 in the directors. And he said, I always am prepared. I always show up on time. I'm always a great team member. And he said, I'm always grateful and thankful for every role I get. And then he's employed nonstop for 50 years. Because it isn't about him. It's about it isn't about him.
Yeah.
Is that when the director gets to number 5, oh, we'll put in Glenn because that's an easy one. And my sense is, the other thing is also to know your value to other people, and what can they always count on you for? You know, I spend a lot of time saying,
that can be a hard one, you know.
Yeah. What can, you know, I always show up on time. I'm always prepared. I always come up with something new, you know, and my team just depends upon that. You know, my clients.
By the way, I was going to ask you, Stephen, do you know who Glenn Morshower is?
No.
Yeah, so he's not, like Dan said, he's not like some A-list celebrity, but he's
that's why he doesn't. That's why he doesn't.
If I saw
know
his face, I'm sure I would know.
But every director everywhere knows who he is.
Yeah, let me share a story that Dan knows this one. But years ago, me and Glenn were speaking at an event in Las Vegas, and I think it was 2009, 2000. Yeah, I think it was around 2009, 2010, and Glenn has been in more military roles than any living actor. And so he was on every episode of 24, other than Kiefer Sutherland, who was the main star. He was on every episode of 24. And at the time, there were pictures of Kiefer Sutherland on People magazine, I believe, National Enquirer, basically all the tabloid type of magazines, on the cover with him drunk on the sidewalk outside of the Viper Room in LA. And I was asking him, I said, so what's the story?
Glenn. You were asking Glenn.
Correct. Yeah, I was asking Glenn, what's the story on Kiefer? He goes, well, now that he's been outed, he goes, I can maybe, say a few things. He said, great guy, super professional, shows up, does a great job. Everyone likes working with him. Awesome guy. And he said at the end of, at the end of his, of the day, he finds it sometimes easier to sit and hang around and, drink in his trailer and on set than go home to his mansion alone. He said, and at this point in Kiefer's life, he goes, his fame is globally inescapable. He said, there's nowhere on the planet that he could go without being recognized. And he said, a single piranha won't do much damage, but a swarm of them will take down a great creature. And he said, if you get into this business, he was referring to the entertainment business, without knowing who you are, it will misinform you. That was the statement he made. And I was like, yeah, I go, that's really interesting. And when I first met him at Sundance, we were having lunch, a friend introduced us, and all these people were coming up to him asking for autographs. And I said to him, I go, does that ever bother you? And he goes, sometimes, if you have to really be somewhere in a hurry, it could sometimes be challenging. He goes, but I wouldn't even have a career if it wasn't for these people. He's like, I am so appreciative that anyone likes what it is I do. He goes, how would I even do what it is I do without these people that like what I do, like my work, and appreciative? He goes, why on earth would I have anything other than gratitude for these individuals? And he had an incredible work ethic, and he was and I've seen him in many situations, and he loves his wife, is just a super caring, grateful, appreciative person, and therefore he gets roles and gets opportunities that others do not, because he just comes from that place. But he also has done a tremendous amount of work on himself, and he's really quite aware of, don't take yourself too seriously. Like my dear friend, Dave Kekich, who unfortunately passed away at 78 years old last year from kind of a malpractice surgery. It was horrible. And Dave wrote, he was my friend who was paralyzed from the chest down for half of his life. And he had one of his credos. He had 100 credos called Kekich's credos. He had an interesting last name. And he said, things are seldom as bleak as they seem when they're going wrong, or seldom as great as they seem when they're going well. Lighten up, you'll live longer. It's just having the state of mind on how you approach things.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
If we can go back and pick up on the ethics, ethics topic. So I looked at your biography. So I looked and I got to the end of your biography and I said, oh, another guy who went to a university, and these were all the classes he took, all the the different occupations. You were in the oil fields, you were a fruit picker, and you did Airbnb in your own car or somebody else's car and everything else. So and lots of different kinds of people, lots of different kinds of situations, including Hollywood, being in Hollywood and, being in the, movie, writing scripts and writing books and everything else. But from the standpoint is that ethics in one area of life is the same as ethics in another area of life.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
There isn't any industry that's more ethical than any other industry.
No. And like you were saying about the actor, your actor friend, I mean, showing up and being ready to, hit your mark and say your lines and not, be shafting anybody else is at least as important as talent, and because somebody will bring you back, and you will bring them back. That's really, like Joe, one of the things you've always said, and this actually comes from Dan too, that part of being an entrepreneur is not only doing what you want to do, but doing it with the people you want to do it with, and so in order to be with those people, you have to be for them what you want them to be for you, right? You have to show up for them and deliver the goods for them and be somebody that, that's ethical, right? That's not gonna throw their buddies under the bus when the heat gets applied, And
well,
one other thing, I just want to say this before I forget it. You were talking about how we judge other people by their actions, but our own selves by our intentions. Yeah. And that one of the axioms in screenwriting, or also in novel writing, in any kind of story writing, is that the villain never thinks he's the villain. From the villain's point of view, he's doing the right thing, right? And that's if you think of any of sort of the great villain speeches, like Jack Nicholson's one in A Few Good Men, where he says, you can't handle the truth. And he's the guy that, basically, okayed the murder of this young Marine, right? But from his point of view, he goes, this wonderful, great speech that Aaron Sorkin wrote about, we have to stand on a wall. There are bad guys on the other side of the wall. And God damn it, you need people like me on that wall, And
no.
So
it was one of the finest movie speeches of all time, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah.
But that's sort of ethics too, in a crazy way.
Oh, it is.
Like, I'm sure, if we had Putin on that show right now, he would say, God damn it, the worst thing that ever happened was when the Soviet Union broke up. My people were crushed mentally by that and psychologically.
Greatest tragedy of the 20th century.
Yeah. I'm going to bring the USSR back, and I don't care who I have to kill or what I have to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that in his mind, he's a saint, and to tens of millions of Russians, he's a saint too.
Yeah.
Not to the Ukrainians, but to the Russians.
It's
I'm
an
not
interesting
sure what
thing
that has to do with anything, but it's just a thought.
No, I think it's a lot to ponder about, like, what do we believe and why do we believe it and what are we really trying to do?
What are 4 or 5 of the best business or entrepreneurial lessons you've learned over your life that you feel have served you the most? I mean, when you were early on, trying to figure out what to do, what were those things that you...
So whatever your position is, commit yourself to bringing your A game to it every single day. One of my publishers is HarperCollins. The former head of HarperCollins, Jane Friedman, started off as a secretary. but I bet you when she was a secretary, she was world class. How many people do you know? It's like, when I become CEO, then I'll bring my A game. So whatever you do, lead without a title, outwork everyone around you, know more about what you do than anyone else. Put effort, like good old hard work is unbelievably important. Second, business building idea, you want to get your plumbing right. So
I can take this in a lot of different
ways. So you want to, this is not a GI, a gastrointestinal tract piece of advice. It's really get your architecture right. Like the time to build your business is not when you're on fire. It's get the right people, get the right financial systems, get the right culture, get the right, so get the architecture right. Third, business, entrepreneurship, be all about creating value. There is a database of the world's happiest people called the German Socio-Political Panel Database. World's largest database of happiness. Happiest people,
really?
Yeah, it's not where they live, it's not what they eat, it's not what they do. They all see themselves as contributors of value. Wow. So make it your obsession and your mission to be contributing value. And that just means if you're flipping pizza, you're doing pizzas, like just say, I'm going to create great value for the people out there expecting my pizza. What else? Innovation, right? Like, it's so easy to become complacent, and yet you want to say, on a consistent basis, how can I bring products out in the world or do work that scares me and that people would probably laugh at? And that's probably what you have to do. That's probably what you have to do.
That is a great insight right there. I mean, because earlier about talking about earning things, confidence does not just happen. Like, oh, I'm going to think I'm confident and be confident, because if you act like you're confident but you're scared, you're really kind of arrogant. You're sort of disguising it. But it starts with courage. Courage never feels good, but confidence feels good. But courage is usually what you have to go through when you're scared, when you're in that position. And then if you do it and you master it, then you get to a point where you feel confident, and then then it's a good feeling. But there's the thing with a lot of people, they just don't want to have to feel any pain. They don't want to have to feel any fear, any uncomfortableness, and they don't do shit in their lives in that state.
Yeah, pain is the result of potential unexpressed. And why are so many people addicted to their phones? Why are so many people addicted to TV? Why are so many people addicted to chit-chat versus executing around their goals? And all the things we've talked about. They will sell you a story which is, no, I love that TV show. I love my addiction to distraction. But it's unconscious. And I think this is like one of the most important things I wish people would understand, which is most of us actually have a broken heart. We are in such pain, as you're suggesting, of potential betrayed. Why? Because as little kids, we had such connection to love, such connection to talent, such connection to the meaning of life, such connection to our potential. And we could have done amazing things. And then our mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, et cetera, well-intentioned as the world is, started matrix, pulling the wool over the veil over our eyes. And we actually became hypnotized into believing that icons are cut from a different cloth. And what that did was it created this well of deep subconscious pain, because we saw that self-betrayal. And what do we do now? We keep really busy being busy, always busy, but it's an escape mechanism of a frightened person. And the real work of a leader and an entrepreneur, it's not building the external business. That's all important. Like we could talk hours on the right team, culture, like I teach all that stuff. Right. The real work of leadership and to be an icon, it's all within. To get to a place where you own your power, you own your talent, you figure out your values. You don't care if people laugh at you, because if they don't laugh at you, you're playing too small. And then you go out in the world and you show up the way you can.
Yeah. So how would you describe the successful entrepreneur? What are the characteristics of these people that truly make it? They make money, they make impact, they do it with integrity, versus the ones that just flounder and kind of have jobs but call themselves business owners or entrepreneurs. I mean, what's the key difference between, I mean, there's a lot of differences, I know, and you've done this for many years, but like what are some of the things that you see as just what makes a great entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, you've got the kind of standard stuff everybody talks about, which is you've got this huge vision, you're able to think 10x over everybody else. You've got this tremendous ability to be both disciplined and focused. And I don't think a lot of people think of entrepreneurs as being disciplined, but those that knock it out of the park have a lot of both of those kind of things. But what was interesting is this executive program I founded and ran for 15 years. I just made it a game to see if I could predict who coming out of that course would build the biggest, fastest companies. And I could. And it came down to something very simple. And that was those who were the hungriest to learn, that had this really thirst for learning. And it's the thing we were talking about, where Mark Cuban in his book, and I'd known Mark for 30 years, but I didn't realize he's had this fundamental routine, this habit, this daily focus of reading 3 hours every day, and he talks about it in his book. Warren Buffett, 500 pages a day. Bill Gates, who we talked about in The Greatest Business Decision, his famous Think Weeks, where his record, 112 books, manuscripts, PhD thesis, white papers. Mark Zuckerberg, this year in 2015's focused to read a book every 2 weeks. Eric Schmidt saying on the stage there at the Milken conference, what was key to him really helping scale up Google. We think he's going to say some really big fancy stuff. He said, no, shut my BlackBerry off every weekend and read a book or two.
Right.
And so it's this, you can't have anything come out of your brain that you don't get in first. And it's this intense ability to learn and then act on it. Bias for action.
Well, so the key there, acting on it, because there's a lot of people that
Exactly.
will go to seminars, they'll read a lot of stuff, they'll consume things, but they spend a lot of their time consuming and reading and less doing. So what is the action element? I mean, there are these unicorns that you can, some of the people you mentioned, people could be thinking, well, I can never do what Warren Buffett does or Zuckerberg. I mean, I'm just whatever, I'm a normal person. How do I apply that? Should I really read that much? I mean, what would be your response to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to come back to this bias for action. Tom Peters, who is my idol, he wrote the very first really popular business book, In Search of Excellence. And he was kind enough to endorse the first book on the cover. And he said, looking back on the 8 things that he found were key to building these significantly excellent companies, he said the only one of the 8 that still holds, he believes, is this bias for action. And that's what most people miss. They have these dreams, but they don't really have visions. Vision's a dream with a plan that then you act on. And then you have these fundamental routines, like reading, like going over for 3 hours every day like Steve Jobs did when he was launching his retail store. And it's what an Olympic athlete has to do that reaches to the gold level, is committing to getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and practicing for 3 hours before they go to school. It's Jordan Spieth, who we've just witnessed have the most amazing year in 2015. That doesn't happen by accident. He had a big, hairy, audacious goal. I want to not only go to the Masters, I want to win the Masters. And then he had this discipline and focus to practice. Did you read some of the stories about where when he'd go over to his family store, he would pick yards between then and he'd hit the golf balls from yard to yard to yard. I mean, this is crazy, this obsession, but that's what's necessary.
Well, and it is the thing that gives the edge. Well, you said something earlier today when you were talking to the EO group about having the, not reading is no different, something like having the
those
ability
who can't read, those who don't read barely have an advantage over those who can't.
Right.
And I think we've lost a lot of that gotta wanna to learn.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you have 4 children?
We do. Yes.
What are you doing as a parent? Do you try to instill entrepreneurial values in them, or do you just kind of let them be their own person, see if they kind of fall into that? Or what are some of, how does this apply to how you're a parent? Some of the things you've learned?
I've always seen, again, that's why I love being an educator. The word education, educare, means to draw out the genius, your whole thing that's within everyone. And you know what? I'm purposely not focused on them being entrepreneurs. The founding fathers of the U.S. said something interesting. We're soldiers, so our children can be farmers, entrepreneurs, so their children can be poets. And what I'm finding is interesting is all of our children have kind of gravitated towards the creative arts side, which, by the way, is the one thing robots, going to be one of kind of the last things that robots are going to take over. Almost every other job, accounting, lawyer, doctor, the kind of things that our generation focused on is being automated.
Right.
So, I think they've got to go with their own trends and I just want him to have this thirst to learn.
How would you define an entrepreneur? I mean, what's entrepreneurship? I mean, I know the original definition of it. If you've never heard it, I don't know if you ever heard it, but
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard my definition, but my definition is an entrepreneur is someone who's too incompetent to work for anyone else. And really, it was. I had like big ideas. I had things I wanted to do, and I'd get into a company and start working. I just go like, I can't work in this minutia. I have to I want to do this, and so I became somebody that wasn't a very good employee.
Yeah.
And so, okay, it's kind of Chip. If you don't like the way we're doing things here, why don't you go do it yourself? And finally, I have no other option. It wasn't even a choice. It was like, if I want to feed myself, I got to figure something out.
No, honestly, I was in the same boat. When I started my own company, I was 22 years old. I could not work for other people. I just had this thing in me, even to the point where I, was in debt for, 2 years credit cards, just clean carpets, doing the hard manual labor. And I was even going broke doing it. And I was like, there's so many ways to go broke. Sitting on a couch watching TV is an easier way to go broke than doing hard manual labor cleaning carpets. But it was in me. I was wired and I wanted to do it. So
and you learned probably something there.
Oh my God, yeah. And I think entrepreneurs, they solve problems for a profit.
Yeah, exactly. That's very good.
Yeah,
very good.
And like Dan Sullivan says, you just make it up and make it real. So you came up with all these things and you actually made them real. And so there's a lot of people that will be watching this that will look at you as an incredibly aspirational role model of how to build and grow a successful enterprise. And they're trying to take their ideas and make them up and then turn it into something. And, I remember saying this years ago in a seminar, if I would have known how difficult being successful in business was, I would have stuck with being a loser. It was just a lot.
So you have a passion.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it's another version of advice you would give to the person out there that hasn't quite nailed it yet. And I say this because even the people that really have reached the top, most of them don't think they have, right?
There's never any top.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the world's highest achievers live with the highest levels of dissatisfaction. I mean, I
agree with you. Yeah, I mean, not me. I chose not to, but I could see my mind moving into that realm if I wanted it to.
Well, good. Well, that's something I want to highlight too. Then I'd love to speak to that mindset that you've had about that, because look, if you're going to play the game, you might as well enjoy it as best you can, because a lot of times you could be winning but feel like you're losing totally based on how you frame it, right? How you look at it. And so when I ask questions like, what would you say to a young person, the truth is I'm really talking about everybody, because this is all available to anyone that's willing to do it. So if someone is wanting to just become better and they're not hitting it, what advice would you give them, or what do they need to do? Do they need to change their attitude? Do they need to look at a different business model? I mean, what are some of the factors? I know there's not just one answer, so I wanted to get some of your perspective.
Well, I go back, I can only say about me, but there was that time when I was like 18 when I just decided that I wanted to learn everything I could. And I think there has to be knowledge is based on the knowledge you already have, so the more you know, the more you know. I find that some people just aren't, they say they want to be successful, they say they want to do it, but then they play their video games, or they watch football games on Sunday, or they're not really driven. I think mostly because they haven't found their passion. And I think they haven't found their passion because either when they were in university, they didn't take a myriad of courses to find out what was really easy for them, which is where their passion is, or they haven't read enough to actually find something they're passionate about. And it almost seems lame, like talking to people like find your passion, but I think I would have made athletic clothing for no money my whole life.
Right.
Just enough to feed my family. Just enough to pay the mortgage would have been fine. Because that's what I was put on the earth to do.
Right.
And so I think it's up for people to get out there and find that. And And as we've talked about before with the landmark, is like figuring out what the blocks in my life were that had me view the world from a place of ultimate possibility rather than being constrained from my past.
Yeah. What scares you, if anything?
Well, I think the normal things, like one of my kids dying, would be, number one. Like I'm actually not concerned about climate change at all. I think the world is like moving at such a rapid pace technology-wise that we've got to solve for everything. Yeah. It's coming, like with the knowledge that's on the on the web and the way people are able to crowdsource information and solve things at such a rapid rate, I think is far faster than climate change is occurring.
Yeah, I agree, and there's a lot of technology. And I will say this, because I'm still, as far as I know, Richard Branson's largest fundraiser. So I've raised a few $1 million, and a big chunk of that money has gone into things that have to do with climate change and the environment. And I've also been around a lot of people that are in that world that call themselves like the saviors of the planet, and this that I don't find to be very, very high integrity individuals. And I think a lot of it is used as fear tactics and things, and there's enormous solutions. And I look at both sides, and I'll interview people on to get completely different perspectives. And there's a guy that I interviewed, Alex Epstein.
Oh, very good.
Great guy. And he wrote a book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. And it's very fascinating because he doesn't sell anything related to that field. He just took a look at how much, how much propaganda is put out about climate change and things, and this other side didn't have a voice to it. And of course, his favorite book is Atlas Shrugged, which is, one of my favorite books and one of your favorite books, and that's we can even maybe talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I think technology coming from the mind of entrepreneurs and the creation of things can solve almost all world problems. And I don't think we have a resource problem, we have a distribution problem when it comes to food, and some of the greatest resources are human resources employed in a certain way. And if I don't know if anyone's ever described you this way, I think you are a brilliant deployer of human resources by empowering them in a certain way. Like the original definition of entrepreneur, the first time it was recorded in usage was in 1804 by a French guy named Jean-Baptiste Say, who said an entrepreneur is an individual that takes resources from a lower yield to a higher.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, from a lower level of productivity to a higher level of productivity. And so when someone thinks of, there's an axe to chop down a tree and someone invents a chainsaw, they've made an invention. But I think when you take a human mind and you take it from here and you make it here, be more productive, higher integrity, more resourceful, more happy, that's entrepreneurship. And then you apply that to technology or anything where there's world problems, you can improve it. And there's plenty of people that use business principles to sell toxic foods, alcohol and tobacco, pharmaceuticals, things that are damaging, but there's a lot of other individuals that are what I would consider empowering and doing things that do good for people. And I think the way that I think of you, which is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, is there's very few people that not only have transformed an entire industry and have made billions of dollars as a result of it, but have empowered literally hundreds of thousands of team members. Because when you take someone to get them to read that book or go through Landmark or whatever sort of thing, you've not just improved that person's performance and their career, you've improved their family, you've improved their family's family. And
then their community, and then, it's extraordinary how that works.
Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead. They're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.